Hi everyone, my name is Brandy Bell and I'd like to welcome you to a webinar hosted by Premier's Data Alliance Collaborative. Today we'll be presenting part 2 of our self-service BI, which will include a demo of Tableau. We will be posting this presentation to our community and Premier Connect in the next couple of days. Also, immediately following the webinar, you'll be prompted to answer a few questions about your experience. We truly appreciate your feedback and thank you in advance. If you missed part 1, our speaker is Rush Shaw, Senior Solution Architect here at Premier. He's been with us for 3 years and he's been working in the BI space for over 13 years. I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Rush and we will check out Tableau.
Hi everyone. We are going to begin by seeing the demo of Tableau, so I don't really have any slides. I only have the Tableau desktop on my machine, which is going to do most of the talking, I hope. We are going to basically see how you can quickly create or cobble together a dashboard in Tableau and how Tableau makes that kind of an experience easy, snappy, and fast. So I'm going to start by launching Tableau and we'll go step by step. We'll start with the metadata part on how you can suck in information from Excel or databases, etc. And then how you can structure that metadata, create calculated columns, do groupings, hierarchies, etc., etc., and then start creating the graph. I hope that it will not take more than 20-25 minutes because we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions after that. So the first thing I'm going to do is launch Tableau. And I'm just going to show you how you connect to the data with Tableau. What kind of data sources are available in Tableau. So on my screen you can now see that one of the great things that Tableau has done is opened up access to data with all kinds of data sources. So you can see Amazon Redshift, you can see the 2 big players in Hadoop, Cloudera and Hortonworks, you can see Google Analytics and BigQuery, you can see the traditional data warehouse appliance players like Greenplum, Vertica and Netezza, and you also see all the other traditional databases. So you have all of that covered, and then of course what a lot of people do with Tableau is just use Microsoft Excel. What I have done today for the demo is basically grab some data from data.medicare.gov in Excel spreadsheets, and we are just going to use that data because of HIPAA reasons. I can't really use any other form of data. So we're going to take a look at first the spreadsheets that we are going to pull into these dashboards, right? So I have a number of spreadsheets that I have created or pulled from the Medicare website. I was especially interested in showing to you the readmission reduction program. So let's take a look at this spreadsheet and how the data is in this spreadsheet and what do we need to do in order to extract value out of that data, right? So let's look at the readmission spreadsheet. So the readmission reduction program was conducted from 2009 through 2012. You can see the start and end dates here. Medicare doesn't give us any kind of trending information, date information, so we don't have that, but we do have interesting information on readmission, 30-day readmissions for a whole lot of hospitals across the country, right? We have the number of discharges that are pertinent to this program, and we have the number of readmissions within 30 days pertinent to this program. We also have a footnote where we are being told whether the data was available for these measures from these hospitals, right? So the grain of our data is at the hospital level. At the same time, I have more information on these hospitals with regard to their address. This is very useful when it comes to geocoding or geocoded intelligence, location intelligence. So this would be very useful if we have this kind of information. So we are going to leverage the hospital master spreadsheet to do some kind of map with it, right? So let's connect to this database and make sure that when we are connecting, we have to be cognizant of how the data is structured. Measure name has 3 different measures. You cannot add across these measures anything. You cannot just do a sum of 85, 484, 85. It doesn't work. So we have to be cognizant of that and basically structure our queries accordingly. I'm going to go ahead in Tableau and basically connect to Microsoft Excel. I'm going to go to my public data folder and pick up the hospital readmission reduction program spreadsheet. Now here is the first thing that you will encounter while connecting to any kind of data source. In this case, it's an Excel workbook. If you had, let's say, a data warehouse, you would see all the tables of your data warehouse, and it would just select the first table out of all the tables in your database, right? So in this case, it's selecting the first spreadsheet, or selecting the alphabetically organized first spreadsheet. I'm going to select, on the other hand, readmission spreadsheet. We can also select multiple spreadsheets here by adding tables. We can also do custom SQL. So we can do any of it. I'm going to first select a single table and then show you how you can add additional tables. I want to also indicate to Tableau that the first row has field names in it, and I want to rename my connection. So I want to refer to the readmission reduction program of Medicare in my connection, and I'm going to say OK. So now Tableau will basically prompt us to select how we are going to refresh data, or how we are going to use data in Tableau workbooks. So this is the paradigm that Tableau, ClickView, and a lot of other self-service BI tools are using now, which allows them to put a lot of these things in memory or in cache. So if you were to select import all data, Tableau would basically extract all the data from that data source and put it into a compressed form in its fast data engine. What this allows it to do is basically, use this data very rapidly. It's almost like an in-memory cube kind of an experience. If you were to connect live, your data would be refreshed every single time. Which is not to say that if you import all the data, you cannot set the refresh rate to be nightly or weekly, etc. In fact, it's recommended that in Tableau you import data and then try to create some kind of nightly refresh in it. I'm going to select Connect Live and then later on show you how you can do the extracts or import all the data. Right? So I'm connecting live to this data. I have one table in it, and that table has all of the columns. Tableau will do automatic modeling. This is another thing that a lot of these self-service BI tools do. Basically, they look at the data type of your columns, and depending on those data types, they decide how they are going to treat the columns, whether they're going to treat the columns as structural, qualitative information, or are they going to treat those columns as numeric, quantitative information, right? So they treat them as dimensions or measures in the parlance of data warehousing, right? So you see that all the date columns and the string columns are all selected as your dimensions, and all the other numeric columns are selected as your aggregatable measures. Now, one thing, there are some additional things that you see. For example, you see provider number that's in dimensions, but you can see by the icon on the left-hand side of it, which indicates that this is a number, that it's not really a string or a date. So you have a calendar icon, you have a string icon, and you have a pound icon. So that pound icon traditionally would go into measures, but Tableau is also intelligent enough to know what my behavior has been with provider numbers. So I've been playing around with this data since yesterday. So Tableau already knows how I'm going to treat the provider number. Had it not known that I was going to treat it as a discrete variable or as a dimension, then you could simply drag and drop it here, because this is text-based or data information. I can drag and drop this here and it would convert it into discrete information. Of course, I didn't intend to do that because this is readmission ratio, so I'm going to put it back. The second thing that you will notice in this dimensions and measures pane is something called measure names and measure values. So what are the different measures that we have in this data source connection right now? We have these 4 measures, or 5 measures, I presume, right? So these 5 measures are treated as measure names here. So if I were to query this, I could by simply selecting measure names, and it would know what measure values to pull. I don't want to do that because I'm comparing apples to oranges in this case. I'm going to drag that back and put it in its place, right? And drag the filter out. Now, if you remember, we also in the beginning talked about how we should use this data. Remember that there are measures that are in rows. Measures are not columns. So you have AMI, which is heart attack based measure for 30-day readmissions. You have a heart failure measure for 30-day readmissions. You have pneumonia measure for 30-day readmissions. So all of those are in rows. They're not in columns. So we have to be sure that when we are looking at this information, we are filtering it accordingly. The other thing I want to highlight is what Tableau does with how Tableau geocodes your data. So all of these columns, they play a role, and especially columns like address columns, they play a distinctly geocoded role or geographic role in Tableau. So I'm just right-clicking on state to just show you how Tableau is treating that column. It is already, depending on the name of the column, Tableau will automatically treat it or geocode that column. Now, if your column is named something else like ST or STE or STTE or something like that, you can obviously go and define the geographic role and change it here. I mean, obviously, this is not a county, but just to show you that you can change your geographic role anytime you want. If it's named the way Tableau expects it, it will geocode it itself. And Tableau will automatically, based on the geocodes, generate the latitudes and the longitudes. So this is important for us to depict the data in a graphic map format, right? Now let's look at what we have about dimensions and measures is the data source connection. Now, if we right-click here, we can see if we want to rename the database connection, if we want to basically create a duplicate, close it, etc. And we can also, if you remember, we talked about importing all data. We can extract the data from here. So I'm going to go ahead and go and extract all the data. All right. Now I can put filters in here. I can also do incremental refresh. I can do all kinds of stuff based on columns. I can do top, etc., etc. So I'm just going to use basically the incremental, not the incremental refresh, but all rows, and I'm going to extract it, right? So Tableau will ask me where do I want to put my extracted data on the desktop, since I'm on the desktop right now. Once I publish this workbook on the server, it will get published into the fast data engine, right? And it will at that point prompt me how I want the server to handle the refreshes for the data extracts. But for the time being, I'm going to go into my documents folder in my Tableau repository, and I'm going to go into my data sources, and I have a bunch of extracts here, right? So I'm going to call it Medicare HRRP. I'm going to say save. What this does is now Tableau is basically extracting or importing all the data right now, right? I'm going to remove that and the measure names. Now we are going to go ahead and add the additional table. I just wanted to show you that you can just basically, you don't have to do it everything at the time you are connecting to data. You can pull one table and then keep on adding more tables. So I'm going to now add more tables. I'm going to say edit tables, and I'm going to first look at the readmissions table. I don't like the name it's been given. I'm going to call it readmission. I'm going to say okay. I'm going to add a table, and this time I'm going to add my readmission master. Now again, I don't like the name, so I'm going to rename it. And as soon as I rename it, Tableau will reset the field aliases for all of them. But I don't want it to reset the field alias, so I'm going to ask it to change them back to the default. Now for columns which already exist in your data source, which have already been pulled, so I had pulled a column called a hospital name. So Tableau is not going to allow you a duplicate name because it needs that uniqueness for reference. So it's basically creating another alias for it. I'm going to basically need only one hospital name. I don't want to put redundant data in here. So I'm going to remove that hospital name column so that it is not pulled. I'm going to remove the provider number because I already have the provider number. And I'm also going to remove the state column. Now you can see the join with the first table that's in here. I'm going to remove this because I want to join these two spreadsheets or these two tables on provider number. Delete. And let's go ahead and select provider number. Add. It's an inner join. I don't want any other data, so I can do that. Right? So there you go. And now the data extract is active. To continue the operation, it must be regenerated. I'll say OK, regenerated. So it's regenerating, and now you have the second table. And again, you see those geocoded columns for city, county, etc. Right? Now, when you right-click on any area in the dimension, you can see a number of things. You can do calculated columns if you want here. You can hide unused fields. You can do a number of things. You can group by folders. So what Tableau allows you to do is not only organize your fields on the basis of data source tables, but you can also organize them with your own Tableau-based metadata so that it's much more user-friendly. So I'm going to show you just one example of that. I'm going to basically create a new folder here. So I'm going to first say group by folder. This way it will be eliminated because there is no folder, and it will give me an opportunity to create a folder. I'm going to call this hospital information. Okay. And I'm going to go and drag all my address related information. I'm selecting control click here, and I'm going to go ahead and take hospital name, hospital. I thought I had not pulled that, but apparently I made the mistake of pulling it. I'm going to take hospital name, hospital type, provider number, and just drag and drop it in the hospital information. I have some other information here that I did not intend to pull. I thought I had not intended to pull this, but we can remove it later or hide it for now. I don't want to do the data extract again. And then I'm going to create another folder, which should basically have HRRP information. And I'm going to push hospital ownership up into hospital information and measure name, readmission footnote, start date of state and zip. I'm going to put it back into hospital information, and I'm going to pull end date out of it in here. So I have now reorganized this table. One more thing that I want to do on this data set is basically we saw the readmission data type, and we know from the footnotes that were provided to us that a lot of data is not available. Or there is too few data to report. Now this can adversely impact the averages that we might be doing. So I want to create a data source filter which eliminates this kind of records. I basically want only data here. If you can see, I only want data that is available. I don't want data that is very small sample or that is not available, so that it doesn't adversely impact my averages. Right? So I only want available data. So I'm going to go ahead and create something called data source filters. Right? So I'm going to edit data source filters on my data. Now you can create this filter right in here, but I just don't want anybody to even use it because it can be dangerous. It can give inaccurate information. So I'm going to go ahead here, and I'm going to start by edit data source filter. I'm going to add a data source filter, and I'm going to say select readmission footnote and only bring in available data, right? Keeps available. And I'm going to go ahead here and say refresh this data, right? I'm going to just make sure that my data is appropriately pulled in. So see, I can only see available, right? The next thing that we saw in this data set that we've talked about a couple of times now is that the measure name is in rows. It's not a column. Some of these measures are not a column. So I am going to go ahead and add them as my quick filter in this chart so that I never make the mistake of adding across those measures, right? So I'm going to take my measure name and I'm going to basically right click and create quick filter. But since it's not available right now, since I've not created a chart, I'm just going to add it in the quick filter section, and this will give me what I want, right? It will add a filter, and I will say, just select readmit AMI for it right now. And then we'll just add quickly a quick filter which will allow users to interact with it, right? Again, I'm going to hide one of these columns that I inadvertently brought in that I don't want. I'm going to later refresh my extract with it. Now you can see that we have a couple, we can now start creating our graph, right? So I'm going to just slowly and steadily start dragging and dropping things, right? So I selected two different measures. I selected number of discharges and number of readmissions, right? Now I'm going up to the top to my show me column, and I'm going to basically select a bullet graph so that I can basically see the sort of percentage that I have, percentage of readmits that I have. I also want to add at the same time hospital name in this, right? So I have hospital name, but I don't like this graph because it doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm going to change it, and now it makes a lot more sense. And you can see how quickly Tableau just renders these things, right? So you have discharges as your columns, and you can basically sort them, and that way you can see visually which hospital had the most number of discharges and were taken into consideration for this program. And then you have a marker here, a line marker, which basically tells you how many readmissions you had, right? So we have this information. We can also sort it by readmits. But what I want to do now is I want to understand what kind of readmit percentage there was, right? I mean, these are absolute numbers. I want to take some relative numbers into consideration in this, right? So I'm just clicking on Shift to move Show Me to make it floating so that it doesn't come in between our view. And now I'm going to basically do a calculated column. Create a calculated field, and I'm going to create readmit rate. I'm going to select sum from here. I'm going to select number of readmissions. Divided by the sum of, I can just type it in, number of discharges, and I have what I need in this case. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to quickly go and give it a format and its default properties. You can see it has a property of automatic. It automatically will aggregate everything. I'm just going to give it a little format to percentage. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag that readmit rate into my labels, right? So it shows me what the readmit rate is like now, right? You can do more things here, like let's take for example, I want to create a hierarchy, right, of my dimensional information, my qualitative structural information, which basically gives me the answer to when, where, what, right? Those kind of questions are being answered by your dimensions. So we are going to go ahead and create a hierarchy, right? So we don't have a lot of organizational information here, but we do have geographic information. So we can create a geographic hierarchy. So I have here a state, and I right click and I can just create a hierarchy and just call it geographic hierarchy. Right? I just have to start dragging and dropping. I can create alternative hierarchy for county if I need to. I don't want to go into too much of that detail, too many hierarchies right now. This is good enough for us, right? You can simply drag and drop these things in your rows, your columns, and see how things are, right? And once you put the hierarchy, you can actually expand the hierarchy. You can take a look at it the way you want, right? So I'm going to remove all that information, but this was just for demo purposes. I wanted to show you. We're going to use another trick of filtering by states in a moment. So we have this information. Now I'm going to add a quick filter. Remember, we want to add some interactivity in this case, and we already have a filter for measure name. So I'm going to select measure name for my quick filter so that I have some interactivity. Now in this measure name, I want to ensure if I hit the down arrow there for drop down list, I have a lot of different options here. What's very important to us in terms of filtering are some of the options that you see right here: single value drop down, single value list, slider, etc., etc. Sliders are very useful with dates, but may not apply to this scenario. So I'm going to use a drop down, single value drop down, because I don't want somebody to ever, add across these measures. So now I have a single value drop down. This makes sense. Now I can interact with it, right? And it will dynamically change. And when we create a dashboard, it will also bring in that widget for us. Or Tableau likes to call it a card. So what you see here is called a card. What you see here on the top is called, this is all nomenclature, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but just for your purpose, it's called a shelf. These are called cards again. This is shelf, and it has a lot of different mark properties. In any case, let's go ahead and place our show me right here. Let's go ahead and also, sort our hospitals in a more creative manner, descending not by number of discharges, which is what it was doing. I want to actually do it by readmit rate, right? And apply. So now the view changes completely, right? You see how the view changed. You can again restore your old view the way it was. The other thing you want to notice here is whenever you hover around any of these bars, you will see information on it, information that is already being used in your visualization. So Tableau will automatically basically give you this information, but that does not mean that Tableau restricts you from adding other information into your tooltips or customizing your tooltips. So you can go to your worksheet properties in your menu at the top, and you can basically go to tooltips and do what you want with it in terms of, defining different look and feel options and aligning your data, changing your fonts, etc., etc. I'm going to just keep it as is, but I'm going to add more information to this. What I really want to know is the excess readmission ratio, which is basically nothing but predicted readmission ratio divided by the expected ratio. So I want this information in my details. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it to my labels. So it added that in my labels. I'm going to go into my label property of the chart, and I'm going to say, not really, I don't want to see that information here. Why don't you remove it from here? I'm also going to change, because it's a ratio, I cannot really add things across. I have to do an average on it. So I'm going to change the measure and make it an average, right? But what this will do is it will still keep that readmit ratio right here, excess readmission ratio right in the tooltip. So I can that way keep on adding more information in my tooltips, right? The other thing you can do is obviously you can customize each of these elements. So you can basically right click and start looking at what you want to do with this graph, right? So one thing you can do is look at the underlying data, right? You can export that data if you were doing this from a database. I mean, of course, we are doing it from Excel, so it doesn't make any sense, but you can do that. You can also annotate stuff. So you can basically lasso this thing and select all of these different bars and sort of keep the annotation. Keep in mind, when you have a lot of filters, annotations will disappear depending on the filter or the parameter choices that you are making. So when you're doing this, you want to be a little cognizant of those kind of things, right? We're going to move on to the next round here, right? So create another geographic map chart in this. I hope so far everything was clear. If you want to make this pretty, you can obviously, as I said, you can change all the parameters, the look and feel of the color here, the size, if you will. I can increase the size of these bars, as you can see. I'm going to go ahead and make this line marker pop out. This is a little tricky to get this line exactly right. Reduce the size so that I can access that line. That line is what's indicating how many readmissions were there for that hospital for that particular measure, right? So I'm going to edit it and I'm going to make it pop a little. There are a lot of other options there. I don't like the colors. I want to go with orange because it will be a good contrast. I'm going to apply that and get out of here. So now it pops a little. You also see some distribution here. You can do all kinds of statistical stuff. You can describe this worksheet right here, as you can see. And you can also create another worksheet based purely on the data underlying this. So you can go to a worksheet and just do a duplicate as worksheet, right? So now you're seeing all the data in numeric format or numeric chart, if you will, right? I really don't want this, so I'm going to delete it. I do want to do one more thing. I want to make sure that this quick filter is applicable to anyone who's using this data source, right? So anyone who will be using this data source will have to comply with this filter, right? So I have done that. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to call this HRRP by hospital. I'm going to create now a geographic map in the second sheet. So I have my geographic hierarchy. Why not just use that? All of it has a geographic role defined for it. I can just simply use this, right? So I'm going to add this sheet here, and voila, it just picks it up and it's coded it. I want to just take the lower 48 states, right? So I'm going to lasso it, and it'll automatically ask me, do you want to keep only these 49 states? And I would say keep only these 49 states. And now you can see that I have a graph. But what are these states right now indicating to us? How is the HRRP program performing by state, right? That's what we're really after. So I want to take my number of readmissions, right? So as soon as I did that, I get really, it automatically decided that it'll add it to basically size. I don't want to do that. I want to drag it back. I want to actually put it in color so that each state has a peculiar color, and it has color-based, it's a sort of a heat map, if you will, right? It's basically telling me that darker the color indicates really that the readmissions were higher. Really, I want to really know if readmissions were higher based on the readmit rate, right? So I want to basically go ahead and somehow figure out the readmit rate. So I can do several things with it, right? So this is where you just play around and figure out whether you want to do this. I don't like it. I want to just remove this sum number, and I want to basically take the readmit rate and add it to the color. Right? Now it's looking good. I'm also going to add a label to this, right? So I want to add geographic hierarchy to my label, right? Because if I'm using state, I want the states to show up and pop out. I want to add a number of readmissions. I like factual information. I like more factual information on my graph. I'm adding it. And I want, of course, the readmit rate. So I have all four of them. Now you'll say it's gotten very crowded. So let's go ahead and remove some of it, right? We want state. State is pretty understandable. But when you're doing rate, it may not necessarily be understandable. So I'm going to do rate. I'm going to use this same thing and click OK. Right? You can also change this labels, and there are a lot of options here. You can highlight the min max in the labels. You can highlight, you can do it highlighted or selected. So what that does is, unless you select it, it will not show you that, right? I don't want to do that. I want to basically keep the marks of the label on the graph. And this gives me a good idea of what's going on with my performance of my program across the country, right? So now we are ready to actually create or use this as a source of our dashboard, a dynamic source for our dashboard, a filtering source for our dashboard. Now, one thing you will notice is that once we declare this measure name here, we changed its property to apply to anything that uses this data source. It got automatically added here. We didn't even have to add that. It's just automatically taken care of. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say this is HRRP by state. And let's go ahead and create a dashboard. So the dashboard, the worksheets get automatically created as soon as you keep on adding more. And dashboards also get automatically, the sheets for them will automatically get created in Tableau. I'm just going to click on the dashboard icon there, and now I have at least two different visualizations that I have created that I can use in Tableau. Anything more than 4 will not work for your dashboard. Anything less than 2 is irrelevant for a dashboard. So we're going to go with our geographic map, HRRP by state, and I'm going to just pull that first at the top, right? So now it gives me that. It also gives me this readmit rate, the heat index for it. I can also drag and drop HRRP down here. And you can see this gray thing that is popping up automatically. You can change all of this later with these organizational or landscaping items that you are seeing on the screen, horizontal, vertical, etc. Those are landscaping items, and you can landscape and even landscape in more detail, whatever you want, right? The first thing I want to do is I want to remove these titles, right? I want to remove this title too. So now I have I have a couple of things here showing up. I don't want them here, right? I don't want the location, so I'm going to click on Shift, and I'm going to just drag and place them where I would really like them to be, right? And I'm going to drag and place them where I would really like them to be. Down here, it's probably here is more space. All right. So I can change things and everything will change. I want to now treat one of these as the filtering criteria for my bullet graph, right? So I can easily go into the properties of that card or that widget, if you will, and basically do a quick, basically select it as a filter, use as a filter, right? So I use this as a filter, and what this will do is it'll allow me to filter my data down here based on this, right? This is what everybody loves, right? You can filter different widgets based on the interaction that you're doing with one of them. You're interacting with only one, but it changes what's going on down here. So if I want to look at why California has such a high readmission rates, who are the culprits here, right? I can basically look at it here very quickly, which hospitals are not performing very well, right? So now that we have a dashboard ready, we can go ahead and publish it. So in order to publish it, I'm going to go to my server icon, because in order for me to share this, I have to either save this workbook and email this workbook to another user who has the desktop, very dangerous with healthcare data, or I can publish it to the server. So I'm going to first publish it to the server, and I have several options, open workbook, a different workbook, etc. Let's publish this to the server. I'm going to click enter I'm going to select a site I want to publish in. I'm going to select a site that I've been using. One mistake I made was did not name the dashboard or put a title on it. So give me a moment and I'll do that. Right, and show title. So the title is now, this is the title for, all right, now we have the title, so I'm going to go and publish the workbook. And I'm going to call it HRRP Demo, Analysis Demo. I can add tags, I can add a number of things. I don't want to do any of it right now. I just want to publish this. And it's just basically transferring all the data and showing me how it will look on the web server. Right? So I basically now have an idea of how this looks. All my interactivity is still in there. Well, it doesn't. All right, it's taking some time. So there you have it. This is now published. And we have a little demo. I think we can either open it up for questions, or I can maybe continue showing you how to do data blending. Okay, we have
the conference has been muted.
Okay, so
the conference has been unmuted.
We already have 2 questions in from Chris Danzy, so go ahead and let Rush answer those.
Yeah, that's the difference, Chris. The first question is it possible to add an annotation comment to a data point? That's correct. So if you look at any of this and you click on this, you do an annotation, you have a data point and you can select it. You just have to remember that this annotations, when you have a lot of parameters, they will disappear, but you can essentially say for this data point, it already gives you an option of what to annotate. You can say investigate readmissions, for example, right? You can make it dynamic. They're too high, you can say, okay, add too high. And what this will do is basically some of discharges, it's giving me all fields. There is a way to give you that, but you can see that it's popping up and you have put an annotation there. You can now also, how should I put it? You can also render it the way you want it. But if I move this, you can see that it disappeared. So it will pop up based on the interactivity when you do it on the point.
Thank you. And so if it was a trend chart, and we annotate May 2014, and then 6 months from now, the trend chart has 6 months more data, than the annotation sort of sticks with May 2014 data point, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Alternative. I mean, there are three options. There is point, there is the mark, and then there is the area. So the difference between pointer and the marker is the marker will stay with the row. The pointer is the intersection of the row and the column, and area is more of a subset. So you can define a grouping, any kind of grouping that you want, and that would be treated as an area. And that area will always have that annotation, if that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
There is Paul has asked a question. Is there a limit?
Chris has one more.
Oh.
Granularity.
How granular can Tableau get with latitude and longitude? So by default, this is something that I should have mentioned, Chris. By default, it will automatically geocode any zip code level information. So your obvious question would be, what about patient street address, right? Because we are all interested in hospital information. There are lots of awesome sites out there for doing bad geocoding. I wanted to basically do it today, but I ran out of time. There are a dime a dozen bad geocoding sites. You can just use those addresses as an information and extract whatever you want. Of course, this is to say that you are living in an Excel world. Ideally, of course, your data warehouse would have that information for street level. You should buy it from someone because street address will not be geocoded. And then the third question is, did you say there is a limit of 4 worksheets on a dashboard? Is that a suggested limit? No, I said 4 widgets. So Paul, that was by Paul from CHP. And Paul, I mean, you can see already in this dashboard that, I mean, you can add 1 more or 2 more widgets or cards in this, but at that point you will run out of space. And then what if you wanted to publish it as an iPad portrait or an iPad landscape? It just, the functionality will reduce. Alternatively, what is awesome about Tableau is you can create a number of dashboards, right? You create 2 or 3 dashboards, and then you can there's something called actions. So this action is a really awesome thing. It's worth exploring because you can add actions of filtering, and you can filter something in one dashboard, and you can go to another dashboard from there, right? And target a widget there. So you can jump around, keep on jumping around. So it does a lot of, it adds a lot of interactivity in the way you want to see it. I mean, it doesn't matter if you want to see, 10 different pieces of information. I'm just saying that don't put all 10 pieces of information in one dashboard worksheet. Create 2 or 3 dashboard worksheets and then implement interactivity.
Well, I've seen dashboards that are made up of small little tiny worksheets.
That's right. With bubbles, a lot of people do it with bubbles, right? So bubble charts which really give no, well, I don't want to go on my rant against bubble charts, but but a lot of people do it for bubble charts, but they do it specifically for filtering. So there's more interactivity here, is whether things are only shown if you select something. So if I selected Virginia, then the bubble would pop up for Virginia, but there would be only one bubble. But if I took a summary view of the entire country, then the bubbles would disappear. So you can do that kind of interactivity. There's also more interactivity in the sense that you can, you might, if you guys have seen TED Radio, TED, those guys who meet in California and Edinburgh and all these places, all the entertainment and technology guys, they do a lot of graphics from Tableau. Actually, Tableau gets its reputation purely from research analysts and Wall Street analysts who love to do all kinds of animations on this. And you can do very quickly, you can add animation to some of these things, especially useful when you're doing things like line charts. But I digress. So let's take another question.
So Donna has a great question. Can you retrieve data from more than one data source on the same report?
Yes. So I was going to do that. I think we have 5 minutes. Maybe I can tackle it unless somebody has another question. But I can very quickly tackle it for you guys.
We have one more question. Pat, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. This is Pat Willinger from CHS. Anything like alerts, let's say we have that would be dynamic, like, our rates. And I want to do an annotation on rates that are above X percentage. And then when I refresh this data next month, that percentage would change, but I want my alert to be, if it's above this, percentage, I want to annotate them.
So the alerts have not become dynamic yet in Tableau, but it is very red hot on their agenda.
Okay.
So it should be coming, I think it should not be more than the next release. When I was looking at Tableau is a wonderful site. It's what I think in the industry, it's probably the best customer service site. You should go and look at what ideas are being presented by the community, and it's one of the most highly rated ideas, dynamic annotations, and dynamic alerts. So there's dynamic annotations are there, dynamic alerts are not there. So let's go ahead and I'm going to do it very quickly, if you don't mind. So I'm going to go ahead and do another data connection here. I'm going to go to a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. Now, I don't have time to explain you what the spreadsheet's data looks like, so just bear with me and agree with everything I say. So, where's my public data? And I'm going to pull up.
Could you connect to a database and an Excel?
Yes,
spreadsheet?
yeah, you can.
So multiple types.
Yeah, unfettered access. That's really the beauty of this. Rapid prototyping and unfettered access, for sure. I'm going to select some Medicare hospital spending by claim. It's really not related to the HRRP project, but I'm just showing you something that we can do with this. So I'm going to add claims. I can add even the hospital master. I don't want to. I'm just going and creating claims connection. I'm saying import all data. Go ahead. And in this case, I'm going to go with my Tableau repository, data sources, and Medicare claims information. This is quite a bit of data, maybe 100,000 records, right? So now I have a secondary data source, and as soon as the data came back, it basically tried to create a join on things that it knew. And it was wondering whether it should create a join on provider number or not. So I'll say, yeah, please create a join based on provider number, because that's my grain, and also keep the join on state. Remove hospital name, I don't really need it. So now I have the two data sources connected. This is my primary, this is my secondary, and I have average spending here per episode by hospital, right? So I'm going to change the aggregate of this, and I'm going to say make it an average. I have something else that I want to make sure that I am looking at. I want to create, in order for the data to make sense, I'm going to create an edit data source filter, and I'm going to add period here, and in period I'm going to say just do complete episodes. Give me the cost average spend for a complete episode, right? And I'm going to say okay. All the averages, I'm going to change them, and I'm going to change their default properties to average, and I'm going to go ahead and now pull one of these measures and put it in my labels, really. Right? There you go. So now you've blended data from two different data sources, and you have it reflected here, right? Automatically. I mean, of course, it got crowded now, so one has to rethink the strategy on how to display it. But yeah, you can do that.
Okay. Well, it looks like we're about out of time, folks. Thank you so much for attending, and just a reminder, the recording will be posted in just a couple of days, and that there will be a brief survey at the end. And please let us know your feedback and any suggestions you may have. And thank you so much for attending, and have a great day.